to it, but also talk about the strategy. Because I think setup and preparation is a huge part of a successful presentation. So when I'm giving one of these, what I'll do is I'll find out as much as I absolutely can about the customer, right? What are their hot buttons? What are their issues? What types of things are important to them? And when they're coming, right? These are important things to know before they even step through the door. And I'll challenge a salesperson if they don't know, to tell me that stuff or to find out ahead of time. If they don't, we don't know anything about the customer, they come through that door, then we spend some time up front talking to them, right, about what they want to get out of this, right? That's an important part of this presentation process. So once I have all that done, I will usually have things staged, not just like this, because I don't want to cover up the work surface, but I'll have foam boards, and I'll have our environmental certificates, and I'll have some research photos, and I'll have all that kind of stuff staged around the room. So I can refer to it during the presentation. But I don't want to have it all over the furniture because I don't want to cover up the beauty of the suite, right? So those are things that I will do to prepare before a customer ever steps in that space. And so if you walked into San Francisco, you'd see props all over the showroom, which is where I typically present. And if I'm not in the showroom, I'm in a mock-up presentation, I'll bring those things with me. Okay? And I think that's a crucial piece of it. The other thing that I do that's a little bit different is I'll incorporate pieces of the wood fundamentals of wood kit into my presentation. So for instance, I'll have the polarization sample, and I'll have that laid out because I think that's important to talk about. It positions you more as an expert. I will have the consistency or the pigment sample that has the extensive amounts of pigment that represents a national or a paoli type finish versus ours in clarity, and I'll have those kinds of samples out. So I'll use those during this quality discussion and finish discussion because people like the visuals, right? You have to make that connection right away. So when I start, first thing I'll do is I'll usually walk them into a space like this. In San Francisco, we have a suite just like this. And we also have a very conservative suite that we didn't have when I went out there, but I kind of talked Charlie into it. And I want to contrast the two, because that's one of the important things about like developments is let them know how much breadth of choice you have with that product line. Because there's nothing out there quite like this in the industry. And I think that's important. So when I show them and start this, and people walk in there, you'll get a reaction typically like, wow, what is this? I would never sit anything like this, kind of what you said earlier. But then I can walk them after I've talked about it and set up the presentation about, why it's laid out this way, why the product solutions are like what they are in this space. And then I take them back into that typical double bed desk work wall configuration. They're like, this is the same product line, and it blows them away.
Do you want to do that today?
Hmm?
Do you want to do that today? Because we have it right over here.
Well, actually, if I don't have that, I'm someplace else and I'll bring pictures.
Okay.
Right? So they can actually understand, but it's more powerful if they can actually walk from space to space. So with that, that's kind of a little bit about what I do strategy-wise during these presentations. So I'll start, and I'll have pictures. I usually don't do it on a laptop, but I'll have pictures that I use to make a connection when we first walk into the space. So the first thing I'll do is I'll have pictures laid out like this, and I'll say, does this look like your office? And I have post-it notes, so I see that photo. And then I'll have pictures like that, which I've pulled from various presentations that I've done.
Do you usually print those out? Is that what you're saying?
I print them out, so I'll have them laid out. I usually will keep them like back in here, and I'll pull them out as I need them with a customer group. And then they'll all gather around, they'll look at stuff like that, and they'll be, wow, this looks very familiar, right? Because these are things that they all are familiar with. Because everybody's a piler except for Kevin. And I'll even sometimes, if it's a law firm, I'll use little things like this, or a financial firm, where these workarounds take place where people are sitting in aisles or the banker boxes, and that's why this office is great for that type of presentation. Or you'll get this type of thing on a collaborative space where they can't enter it, they can't use it because it's in use, or it's got banker boxes or cases and stuff. I'll even talk about the staging that might take place in the space, which we see typically. Yes, do you have piles around your space? And people will say, yeah, I've seen that. Or they'll point to someone else, and they'll say, he does that all the time. You know what I mean? So you're getting them loosened up right away. And that sets the stage for going into talking about research, which is the first thing that I'll do. I'll start out by talking about the fact that we're not just a furniture company. But really, we pride ourselves at being a research company, at understanding the way people work in their space. And we spend tons of money every year, observing people in their spaces, right? So that's the kind of thing that I start out talking about right away. So I don't want them to think we're just another furniture manufacturer. I want to differentiate us from Knoll and Miller and everybody else that's out there. So, and that's why this is a good space for that, because once you talk about you're a research company, and that's what you do, the second thing I'll do is I'll talk about why we do that. We'll channel those things into different applications like you see it here, which is not your typical office, right? Not your father's private office, which I'll show you in a minute in the back room, but it's something that really supports the way that you work more efficiently and more effectively and more comfortably. And those are the things that we're trying to do, right? So that's why we spend all this time and money. So with that, I'll talk a little bit about what takes place in this type of an office and why it's laid out this way. I'll talk about the fact that, you know, we're looking at the technology interface, the collaboration that takes place, the type of activity that takes place in that space with the customer, and how it's, you know, takes place in their works every day. And then I will talk about why this is laid out the way it is. So for instance, I'll show people that pilers and I'll say, what would you do if you had a work surface this long? And the true pilers will say, you know, light bulb turns on, I'd love that. I'd fill this thing up in about 2 seconds. But then I talk about the fact that this layering, you know, that takes place in the space, number one, we drop down to one highs. From the door, then, you're looking over here, you're seeing all these piles, but you don't see it from the door, so it looks more organized, and it looks cleaner. And some of the people, or facilities people, like that, right? Because they want to be able to hide some of that mess, especially when other clients or people are coming through the space. So I say, we make these up to 120 inches long. It supports that type of collaboration interaction that might take place in this space. And then we can drop it down here, or this could even be used for an area where you could put a height adjustable, not with an overhead here, but a height adjustable table, support ergonomics in the space. And I talk about the fact that we will integrate AirTouch, and we will usually have an AirTouch there, in a space like this, typically, to support that kind of sit-stand type posturing that might take place in a day. And so, with that, I'm showing them in the back corner, I'm saying typically, you know, you would have work surfaces that come together, or a corner work surface here. And now what we've done is, instead of having all that dead space that takes place above or below, now you've got usable piling type space that can take place by this layering. Better fix that. So, and then I'll you know, point out features like all the open space that, you know, supports the type of banker boxes and interaction that, you know, we have take place. The lowering of the overhead on the wall, so it creates a sit-stand type thing without having a height adjustable and paying for that. So you could change position, go from here to here with your laptop, stand or sit. You know, and again, this area over here could be used for returning calls, you know, doing some light reading, that type of thing throughout the day. So this movement in the space we're promoting because it's healthier. And by the way, if you don't realize it, you're doing it anyway because we've watched you. You know? So that's the kind of thing of discussion I have in here when I'm talking about why this looks the way it does. And you say you talk similarly about this when you bring customers into this space, right? Support the research. So that's the first thing I do, is I'll talk about those types of things, and that it's research infused. And then we'll contrast that by going to the back room and talking about why that's laid out the way it is. Primarily because nobody ever looked at or did anything and studied this like what Steelcase is doing in the way people are actually working in spaces.